All right, in this problem, we are making coffee. So at first it says to use the data in the table to approximate C prime of 3.5. So they're asking us to use the average rate of change to approximate the derivative, because if we have a table, all we can do is the average rate of change. So 3.5 comes right between 3 and 4. So C prime of 3.5 is going to be approximately C of 4 minus C of 3 divided by 4 minus 3, which is 12.8 minus 11.2 over 1, 1.6. And then the units, we're going to do the units from Y divided by the units from X. So that was ounces and then minutes. And so that's ounces per minute. And they wanted that unit of measure, so that's good. So 1.6 ounces per minute is the answer for part A. All right, for part B, it says, is there a time between 2 and 4 where C prime of t is 2? So here they're asking for a value, and they want to know if the rate of change is 2. So that means we're not using the intermediate value theorem, we're using the mean value theorem. So I'm going to go ahead and figure out, we're going to say C of 4 minus C of 2. We're going to find the rate of change between those two. C of 4, that's 12.8 minus 8.8 divided by 2. That's 4 over 2, which is 2. And then, of course, we don't want to have this equality train here. So if you want to change these to arrows. Boop. Okay. So we've got that. And yeah. Okay, so we just showed that C prime of t is 2. Here it says that the table is differentiable. That means that the table should also be continuous. So I'm going to say since C of t is differentiable, it is also continuous on 2, 4. And we're going to say by the mean value theorem, there exists some C on 2, 4 such that C prime of C is 2. I guess you could use a letter other than C on that one. All right, and then for part D, they give us a new equation, and they want us to find the rate at which the amount of coffee in the cup is changing when t equals 5. So, so sorry, skipped one. C. Just kidding. All right, they said use the midpoint sum to find 1/6 times the integral from 0 to 6 of c of t dt, explain the meaning of it, and then also find it. So if you guys can see this part, 1/6, 0 to 6 c of t dt, that's the average value of the ounces that are being poured into the cup. So that means that's the average value of the amount of coffee in the cup from t equals 0 to t equals 6 minutes. So what we're doing here is we're just finding all of the coffee, adding it all up, and then dividing it by 6 to find the average. So I'm going to go ahead and say I've got 1/6 times, and then they want us to use the midpoint sum, and they want us to use 3 intervals. So we're going to go from 0 to 2, 2 to 4, and then 4 to 6. And the nice thing is that all of those intervals are a width of 2. So then we just have to use the midpoint. So between 0 and 2, the midpoint is 1, so that's 5.3. Between 2 and 4, the midpoint is 3, so 11.2. Between 4 and 6, the midpoint is 5, so 13.8. Okay. So we've got 1/3 times 0.2 and 0.8, that's 1. So 11 and 13 is 24, 25, 30.3. divided by 1/3, so we've got 10.1 ounces. So the average amount of coffee in the cup Okay, now we can move on to part D. So part D is talking about B of t, and they want to know how the amount of coffee in the cup is changing when t equals 5. So they basically just want you to find B prime of 5. So that's not too bad. The hardest part about it is just that we don't get to use a calculator. So we've got B of t is 16 minus 16e to the negative 0.4t. And so B prime of t is 0 minus 16e to the negative 0.4t times negative 0.4. 0.4 is 2/5. So I've got negative 16 times negative 2/5 e to the negative 0.4t. I'm just going to call this negative 2/5. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and plug in 5. So 32 over 5 e to the negative 2. So I can say, they didn't say you had to write it in context, but I'll go ahead and do it anyway. So the amount of coffee in the cup is increasing because this is a positive number. Even though you have a negative exponent in there, you've got a negative, but it doesn't make the overall number negative. It's still positive, so that means that the amount of coffee is increasing by 32/5 e to the negative 2 ounces per minute at time t equals 5 minutes.